He was just a boy when the state took him, and a man when it gave him back a single piece of paper and a key to a place no one wanted. They told him he'd inherited a worthless cave, but what he discovered inside would redefine the meaning of home, family, and the true weight of a legacy. If you've ever felt like you were starting over with nothing but the clothes on your back and a story nobody wanted to hear, I need you to hit that subscribe button. This is a place for stories like that, for people like us. Let's get into it. The day I turned 18 was the day I ceased to be a problem for the state of Oregon. There was no cake, no party, just a cardboard box containing 2 pairs of jeans, a handful of t-shirts, my birth certificate, and a social security card that felt like a forgery in my hands. For 12 years, I had been a ward, a case file, a number in a system designed for temporary solutions that often became permanent. And then, with the stroke of a pen on a document I wasn't allowed to read, I was free. It felt less like freedom and more like being pushed out of a moving car. Ms. Albright, my caseworker for the final 2 years, was the one who handled the discharge. She had a face permanently etched with tired sympathy, a look I'd seen on a dozen caseworkers before her. They all wore it like a uniform. She sat across from me in her beige office, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant. A stack of papers sat between us, a flimsy wall separating my past from my future. "Okay, Leo," she said, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the top page. "This is it. You're officially an adult. Congratulations, I guess." The humor was so dry it could have started a fire. I just nodded, my hands clasped tight in my lap to keep them from shaking. My entire life was in that box at my feet. It didn't seem like enough to build an adulthood on. "Now," she continued, sliding a thick manila envelope across the desk, "we need to discuss your inheritance." I blinked. The word sounded foreign, like something from a movie. "My what?" "Your inheritance," she repeated, her voice patient but strained. "From your grandfather, Arthur Vance. It's been held in trust by the state since his passing, which was, let's see." She shuffled some papers. 11 years ago. Since you were a minor with no legal guardian, it defaulted to our care until you came of age." My breath caught in my throat. Grandfather. The name was a ghost, a whisper from a life I barely remembered before the system swallowed me. I had faded photographs in my mind, a kind, wrinkled face, the smell of sawdust and pipe tobacco, strong hands that could fix anything. He was the one who had tried to keep me after my parents died, but the state had its reasons. Old age, a lack of income, a house deemed unsuitable. They had their checklist, and he didn't tick the boxes. I hadn't heard a thing about him since they took me away. I'd assumed he'd just forgotten, or that he'd passed away with nothing to his name. "He left me something?" My voice was a hoarse whisper. Ms. Albright gave me that sympathetic wince again. "Leo, I need you to manage your expectations. It's not a fortune. It's a piece of property." She pushed the envelope closer. My name was typed on the front. Leo Vance. It looked official, important. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. Inside was a deed, brittle and yellowed with age, and a single, rusted key. I unfolded the deed. The legal language was dense, but I could make out the important parts. A plot of land, 5 acres, in a county I'd never heard of, 300 miles east of Portland. And under the description of the property, in parentheses, were the words, "Includes natural cavern formation." A cave. "It's a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, Leo," Ms. Albright said, her tone gentle, trying to soften a blow I didn't yet understand. The county assesses its value at next to nothing. The land is mostly rock, unsuitable for farming or development. The only structure is a dilapidated hunting cabin that's probably been condemned for years. And the cave, well, it's just a hole in the ground. We had it appraised as per protocol. It's worthless. Worthless. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. A worthless piece of rock and a hole in the ground. That was my inheritance. That was the final word from the grandfather I'd spent my childhood trying to remember. It felt like a cruel joke. For a moment, a hot, bitter anger surged through me. He'd left me nothing. He'd abandoned me and left me a final insult from beyond the grave. "There's more," she said, pulling out another document. It was a letter from a law firm. "There's a standing offer to purchase the land from a development corporation, Titan Industries. They've been trying to buy up parcels in that area for a while now. The offer is $5,000. She looked at me, her eyes trying to convey the gravity of the suggestion. "Leo, my advice, as your former caseworker and just as a person, is to take the money. It's not much, but it would be a start. Enough for a deposit on an apartment, some food, a chance to get on your feet." $5,000. It sounded like $1 million. It was more money than I'd ever held in my life. It was a bus ticket to anywhere else. It was a clean break. It was the smart choice, the logical choice. Sell the worthless land, take the cash, and never look back. Forget the ghost of a grandfather who'd left me a hole in the ground. "They want to buy it?" I asked, the question feeling stupid as soon as it left my lips. "If it's worthless, why do they want it?" Ms. Albright sighed, the sound of 1,000 frustrating conversations. "Developers, Leo. They buy up cheap, unwanted land and sit on it for decades, hoping it becomes valuable. Or maybe they want it for mineral rights or access to other parcels. Who knows? The point is, they're offering you a way out, a fresh start." I looked down at the key in my palm. It was old, ornate, the kind of key you see in fairy tales. It felt heavy, impossibly so. It was a key to a place I'd never seen, a place that was mine, a worthless place, a forgotten place, just like me. Something inside me, a stubborn, foolish flicker of defiance, refused to let go. For 12 years, other people had made decisions for me. They decided where I lived, what I ate, who I was. They decided my grandfather wasn't good enough. They decided this land was worthless. Now, for the first time, the decision was mine. "I want to see it," I said, the words surprising me as much as they did her. Ms. Albright's carefully constructed patience finally cracked. "Leo, be realistic. It's a 300-mile bus ride to the nearest town, and then you'd have to find a way to get out to the property. There's no electricity, no running water. What are you going to do? Camp out in a cave? You have nothing." "I have a deed," I said, my voice firmer now, "and a key." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw a flicker of something other than pity in her eyes. Maybe it was frustration. Maybe it was a sliver of respect. She slumped back in her chair, defeated. "Okay," she said, rubbing her temples. "Okay, Leo, it's your life, your decision." She slid a bus voucher and a small envelope across the desk. "This is your discharge stipend, $200. It's meant to last you until you find a job. Don't spend it all on the trip." I stood up, stuffing the deed, the key, and the money into my pocket. I picked up my cardboard box. It felt a little heavier now. The office, which had been the backdrop for the final chapter of my institutional life, suddenly seemed small and suffocating. "Thank you, Ms. Albright," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Thank you for what? For processing my paperwork? For telling me my inheritance was worthless?" She just nodded. "Good luck, Leo. Try to make good choices." I walked out of that office, down the long, sterile hallway of the Department of Family Services, and out into the gray Portland drizzle. The door clicked shut behind me, a sound of finality. I was 18. I was an adult. I was homeless, jobless, and my only worldly possession was a box of clothes and a deed to a worthless cave. And I was heading toward it, with no idea why. I just knew that I had to. I had to see the last piece of my grandfather, even if it was just a hole in the ground. I had to know, for myself, if that was all he thought I was worth. The bus ride was a long, slow bleed from one world into another. The city, with its concrete and its noise and its perpetual gray haze, gradually gave way to sprawling suburbs, then to farmland, and finally to the vast, empty expanse of eastern Oregon. The landscape flattened, the trees grew sparse, and the sky opened up, a brilliant, aching blue I hadn't seen in years. I sat with my forehead pressed against the cool glass of the window, my box tucked between my feet, watching the world I knew disappear behind me. For 12 years, my world had been confined. The group home, the school, the occasional supervised outing. Everything was scheduled, controlled, and beige. Now, the sheer scale of the landscape outside was overwhelming. The mountains on the horizon looked like jagged teeth, and the plains stretched on forever. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. I felt like a single, insignificant speck in the middle of it all. The other passengers were a quiet, transient bunch, a young mother with a fussy baby, an old man in a cowboy hat who slept with his mouth open, a group of college kids heading home for the weekend. No one paid me any mind, and for that I was grateful. I was an expert at being invisible. It was a survival skill you learned quickly in the system. Don't draw attention. Don't cause problems. Just exist. As the miles rolled by, my anger at my grandfather began to curdle into a strange sort of grief. I tried to summon more memories of him, to piece together the fragments I had. I remembered him teaching me how to skip stones on a river, his voice a low, rumbling laugh. I remembered the calloused feel of his hand holding mine. I remembered a story he used to tell me about a man who could talk to birds. But the details were blurry, like an old photograph left out in the sun. Who was he, really? Why hadn't he fought harder for me? And why, after all this time, would his only message be a piece of useless land? I thought about the $5,000, the smart choice. Ms. Albright's voice echoed in my head. A fresh start. I could get off this bus in the next big town, find the nearest law office, sign the papers, and be done with it. I could have a real chance, an apartment, a job, a life. It was so tempting, a siren song of safety and normalcy. All I had to do was let go of this foolish, sentimental journey, let go of a ghost. But I couldn't. The key in my pocket felt like a lodestone, pulling me eastward. It was more than just a key. It was a question. And I couldn't live with myself if I didn't find the answer. Even if the answer was that my grandfather didn't care. Even if the answer was nothing. I had to know. The bus finally pulled into the town of Juniper Creek late in the afternoon. It wasn't so much a town as a suggestion of one. A single main street with a gas station, a diner, a general store, and a post office. A handful of houses were scattered around it, their paint peeling under the relentless sun. The air was dry and smelled of dust and sagebrush. The bus hissed to a stop, and the driver called out the name. I was the only one who got off. I stood on the cracked sidewalk, my box in my hand, as the bus pulled away, leaving me in a cloud of diesel fumes and silence. The silence was the first thing I noticed. It was absolute, a ringing in my ears after the constant hum of the city and the drone of the bus. I felt exposed, a solitary figure on an empty stage. A man in a greasy apron was sweeping the wooden porch of the diner. He stopped and watched me, his eyes narrowed. I probably looked like what I was, a stray, out of place and lost. I took a deep breath and walked toward him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding small in the vast quiet. "I'm looking for a property. Vance property?" The man leaned on his broom, squinting at me. He was old, with a face like a dried apple. "Vance? Haven't heard that name in years. You must mean old Arthur's place." My heart leaped. Yes, Arthur Vance. He was my grandfather. The man's expression softened slightly. "Arthur's boy, eh? Well, I'll be. Last I saw him, he was fighting the county tooth and nail to keep you." He shook his head, a sad, distant look in his eyes. "Shame what they did. He was a good man, Arthur. Stubborn as a mule, but a good man." He pointed his broom down a dirt road that branched off from the main street. "It's about 5 miles that way. You can't miss it. Last place on the road before it peters out into nothing. Got a collapsed barn and a cabin that ain't fit for a raccoon. You ain't thinking of staying out there, are you?" "Just want to see it," I said, not wanting to admit I had nowhere else to go. He grunted. "Well, you'll need a ride. Jedediah over at the store does deliveries. Might take you for a few bucks." He nodded toward the general store, then went back to his sweeping, the conversation clearly over. Jedediah was a younger man, with a kind face and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. He listened to my request, his eyes taking in my worn-out jeans and the pathetic cardboard box I was carrying. "Arthur's place," he said, a note of pity in his voice. "Sure, I can take you. But son, there's nothing out there." "I know," I said. "I just need to see it." The ride out was bumpy, the truck rattling along the rutted dirt road. Dust billowed up behind us, coating everything in a fine red powder. The landscape grew wilder, the sagebrush thicker, the hills studded with juniper trees and strange rock formations. It was harsh and beautiful and felt like another planet. "He was a character, your granddad," Jedediah said, breaking the silence. "Kept to himself mostly, after everything. Folks around here thought he was a bit crazy. Spent all his time up on that rock of his, digging." "Digging?" I asked. "Yep, always digging. Said he was looking for something. Never said what." Finally, he slowed the truck and pointed. "There she is." I looked, and my heart sank. Ms. Albright had been generous. The property was a disaster. A collapsed skeleton of a barn leaned precariously to one side. The cabin was tiny, its roof sagging in the middle, windows boarded up, the porch choked with weeds. The whole place looked like it was being slowly reclaimed by the unforgiving land. And behind it all, looming like a dark, silent sentinel, was a hillside of sheer rock. My inheritance. Jedediah pulled the truck to a stop. "This is as far as I go. You sure about this, son?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice hollow. I paid him the $10 he asked for, grabbed my box, and stepped out into the dust. He gave me a long, worried look, then turned the truck around and drove away, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence. I stood there for a long time, just looking. The despair was a physical weight pressing down on me. This was it. This was the grand prize at the end of my journey. A pile of rubble, a testament to a broken old man's lonely life. Ms. Albright was right. Jedediah was right. Everyone was right. It was worthless. Slowly, I walked toward the cabin. The porch steps groaned under my weight, and I had to put my shoulder into the door to get it open. The inside was even worse. It was one small room, thick with the smell of dust, damp, and decay. A broken table, a single chair, and a cot with a rotting mattress were the only furniture. Everything was covered in a thick layer of grime and cobwebs. It was a tomb. I dropped my box on the floor, the sound echoing in the small space. A wave of hopelessness washed over me so powerful it made my knees weak. I had been a fool. I had chased a ghost across the state, spent nearly half my money, all for this, for nothing. I sank onto the filthy floor, buried my face in my hands, and for the first time since I was a little boy, being pulled away from my grandfather's arms, I cried. I cried for the life I'd lost, for the man I barely knew, and for the utter, crushing loneliness of my future. After a while, the tears stopped. I was left with a hollow, aching emptiness. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. I knew I couldn't stay in the cabin. It felt unsafe, haunted by neglect. I had to see the rest of it. I had to see the cave. I got up, my body stiff and sore, and went back outside. I walked past the cabin, my feet crunching on the dry, gravelly soil, and headed toward the rock face. The entrance was not hard to find. It was a dark, jagged slash in the stone, partially hidden by an overgrown juniper bush. It was smaller than I'd imagined, not a grand cavern, but a narrow opening, a black mouth leading into the earth. A cold draft flowed out of it, carrying a scent of damp stone and deep, ancient cold. It was intimidating. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. What was I doing? This was insane. There could be anything in there. Animals, a sheer drop. Nothing. But I had come this far. I had to see it through. I took the small flashlight I'd bought at the general store out of my pocket. Its beam, a weak, trembling spear of light against the encroaching darkness. I took a deep breath, pushed aside the branches, and stepped out of the world and into the cave. The air was immediately colder, the silence deeper. The narrow entrance opened up quickly into a larger chamber, the ceiling high above my head, lost in the shadows beyond my flashlight's beam. The ground was smooth, worn down by centuries of water that no longer flowed. The walls were slick with moisture, glistening in the light. It was beautiful, in a stark, intimidating way. It was a cathedral of stone and silence. I walked deeper, my footsteps echoing unnervingly. The chamber narrowed again into a smaller passage. I followed it, my light dancing over the rock walls. And then I saw it. In a small alcove, tucked away as if to protect it, was a wooden chest. It wasn't an ancient, treasure-filled thing from a pirate movie. It was a simple, sturdy footlocker, the kind soldiers use, with a heavy-duty padlock on the front. And sitting on top of it was a small, flat metal box. A biscuit tin. My breath hitched. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight steady. This was it. This was what he was digging for. Or maybe what he was digging to hide. I knelt down, my light focused on the tin. It wasn't locked. With trembling fingers, I pried open the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed cotton, was a key. It was not old and rusted like the one to the cabin. This one was newer, brass, and it looked like it would fit the padlock on the chest. And underneath the key was a single folded envelope. My name, Leo, was written on the front in a shaky but clear hand. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. This was a message left just for me. I carefully picked up the envelope, my fingers tracing the letters of my name. I opened it. Inside were 2 pages filled with that same handwriting. I angled the flashlight onto the paper and began to read. My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, then it means 2 things. First, it means I am gone, and for that, I am more sorry than you will ever know. Second, it means you have come back. You found this place. You didn't listen to them when they told you it was worthless. You had the heart of an explorer, even as a little boy. I knew you would. That stubborn Vance blood. I know you must have questions. I know you must be angry. You have every right to be. They told you I gave you up, didn't they? That I wasn't fit. That I let you go. It's a lie, Leo. It's the one lie I have had to live with all these years, and it has eaten me alive. I never gave you up. They took you, and I have spent every day since trying to make a way for you to come home. The words blurred through my tears. I had to stop and wipe my eyes, my whole body trembling with the force of my emotions. He hadn't abandoned me. The simple, powerful truth of it hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't let me go. I took a ragged breath and continued reading. When your parents died, I was all you had, and you were all I had. But I was an old man with a bad pension and a house the county said was falling down. They said I couldn't provide for you. They were going to put you in the system, send you bouncing from house to house. I couldn't let that happen. I begged them, I fought them, but they had the law on their side. So I made a deal with the devil. A man from the state, a cold man in a cheap suit. He said, if I signed over my parental rights voluntarily, they would ensure you were placed in a stable, long-term group home until you were 18. He said it was the only way to keep you from getting lost in the foster system. He said if I fought them and lost, they would make sure I never saw you again. He promised me you would be safe. It was a choice between losing you a little and losing you completely. So I signed. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I chose to let you think I had abandoned you, so that you might have a chance at a stable life. I hope someday you can forgive me for that. I had to stop again, a sob escaping my throat, echoing in the silent cave. Forgiveness. There was nothing to forgive. In that moment, all the bitterness, all the years of feeling unwanted, it all just evaporated, replaced by a profound, aching love for this man I barely remembered. He hadn't abandoned me. He had sacrificed his own heart to protect me. He had chosen my safety over his own reputation in my eyes. The letter continued. But I never gave up on you, son. I knew you would be a man at 18, and you would be free. And I knew you would need a place to land, a home. So I started working. This land, this worthless rock, was all I had. But I knew its secret, a secret my father told me, and his father told him. This isn't just a cave, Leo. It's the entrance to a system. And deep inside, there's something valuable. Not gold, not jewels, something better. Water. There's an underground spring in this cave, pure and deep. In a land as dry as this, water is life. It's wealth. The big development companies have been trying to find a reliable water source in this valley for years. They've been buying up land, drilling dry wells, coming up empty. They don't know that the source is right here, under our feet. I've spent the last 10 years mapping the caverns, measuring the flow, and making sure it was all hidden. This cave is your real inheritance, Leo. The key in this tin opens the chest. Inside you'll find everything you need: my maps, my geological surveys, the water potability reports, proof, and something else to help you get started. You have a choice to make. The developers, Titan Industries, they know something is here. They can sense it. They'll come sniffing around. They probably already have. They'll offer you money for the land. They'll tell you it's worthless. Then they'll offer you a little something to make you go away. It will be tempting. You could take their money and walk away, start a new life somewhere else. There is no shame in that. You deserve an easy life after everything you've been through. Or you can stay. You can fight. You can use what's in that chest to show them what this land is really worth. You can build a life here, on your own terms. It will be hard. They will not make it easy. But this place, Leo, this is your home. It was my home, and I've kept it safe for you. Whatever you choose, know this: I never stopped loving you, not for one single day. I have watched you from afar, getting pictures when I could, praying you were safe. I am so proud of the man I know you have become. Be strong, Leo. Be brave, and be happy. All my love, Grandfather. I sat there in the cold, silent dark of the cave, the letter clutched in my hand, and I wept. I wept for the years we'd lost. I wept for his lonely, secret struggle. I wept for his incredible, hidden love. I wept because for the first time in my life, I felt truly, unconditionally loved. He hadn't left me a worthless cave. He'd left me a home. He'd left me a mission. He'd left me a choice. And in that moment, there was no choice at all. The flashlight beam trembled on the heavy padlock of the footlocker. The brass key felt warm in my hand, a conduit to the past. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, solid click. I lifted the heavy lid, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The first thing I saw was a thick, leather-bound journal. I lifted it out. It was my grandfather's. The pages were filled with his familiar, shaky script, detailing years of lonely work. There were hand-drawn maps of the cave system, so intricate and detailed they looked like something from a fantasy novel. There were notes on water flow, pressure, temperature. He had documented everything. Tucked into the back of the journal was a sheaf of official-looking documents: geological survey results, water quality tests from a lab in Bend, all confirming what his letter had said. The water was pure, abundant, and valuable. Beneath the journal was a stack of sealed, waterproof bags. I opened the first one. It was full of cash. Neat bundles of 20s and 50s, held together with rubber bands. I pulled them out, my hands shaking. I counted it. $10,000. More money than I could comprehend. It was a fortune. It was a start. The next bag held more personal things. Photographs. There was one of my parents, young and smiling on their wedding day. There were pictures of me as a baby, a toddler, a little boy with a gap-toothed grin, usually held in the arms of my grandfather. He had kept them all. He had watched me grow up from a distance. There was also a simple silver locket. Inside was a tiny picture of him and a woman I assumed was my grandmother. On the other side, a picture of me. The final bag contained a single, thick envelope addressed to a law firm in the nearest big city. I didn't open it. I had a feeling I knew what it was. It was his ammunition, his legacy, his final move in a game he'd been playing for over a decade. I sat back on my heels, the contents of the chest spread out before me on the cave floor, illuminated by the single, lonely beam of my flashlight. This was overwhelming. The grief, the love, the sudden weight of responsibility. It was all too much. I felt like I was drowning in it. I thought about the $5,000 Titan Industries had offered. It seemed like such a paltry, insulting sum now. A cheap trick to steal a legacy. Ms. Albright's words came back to me. Take the money, a fresh start. This was a fresh start, but it wasn't the one she had imagined. This wasn't about running away. This was about digging in. My phone, a cheap burner I'd bought with my stipend, had a single bar of service at the mouth of the cave. I found the letter from the developers that Ms. Albright had given me. There was a name and a number at the bottom. Mr. Davies. I dialed before I could lose my nerve. It rang twice, then a slick professional voice answered. Davies? Hello, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. My name is Leo Vance. I'm calling about the offer for the property in Juniper Creek. There was a pause. Ah, Mr. Vance. Yes, we've been expecting your call. I trust you've come to your senses and are ready to accept our generous offer? His tone was condescending, oily. He sounded like he was used to getting his way. I've seen the property, I said, my grip tightening on the phone, and I've seen your offer. Excellent, he said smoothly. $5,000. We can have the paperwork messengered to you tomorrow. A quick and easy transaction. You'll be on your way in no time. I took a deep breath, the cold cave air filling my lungs. I looked at the chest, at my grandfather's journal, at the life he had fought to preserve for me. The offer is rejected, I said. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could almost hear him processing my words, his arrogance turning to irritation. I'm sorry, he said, his voice losing its slickness. I don't think I heard you correctly. You heard me, I said, a new, unfamiliar confidence rising in me. The offer is rejected. The property is not for sale. Mr. Vance, he said, his voice now cold and hard. Let's be realistic. You're an 18-year-old kid with nothing. That land is a worthless pile of rocks. Our offer is more than fair. It's charity. It's funny you should mention rocks, I said, the words of my grandfather's letter echoing in my mind. My grandfather did some surveys. He found the water table. He found the source. Another pause, this one longer, more charged. He knew, or he suspected. That's why they were so persistent. That's a ridiculous bluff, son, he finally spat, but the confidence was gone from his voice. It was replaced by a raw, angry edge. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have his maps, I said calmly, his geological reports, his water potability tests. I have everything. So here's my counteroffer. You can leave me and my land alone, or you can come back with an offer that reflects the actual value of the only viable water source in this entire valley. And I'm talking millions, Mr. Davies, not thousands. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. My hand was shaking and my heart was hammering, but I was smiling. A real, genuine smile. For the first time, I hadn't just accepted what the world had given me. I had pushed back. Listen, if you've ever had to stand up to someone who thought they could just roll over you, I want you to let me know in the comments. We've all had those moments where we have to find a strength we didn't know we had. Your stories matter here. This community is built on people who understand that fight. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It helps me keep telling stories for people like us. Now let's get back to what happened next. The night in the cave was cold, but I barely noticed. I had my grandfather's heavy wool coat from the chest, and I spent hours reading his journal by flashlight. It was more than just data and maps. It was his story. He wrote about his loneliness, his fears for me, his anger at the system. He wrote about his small victories, finding a new passage in the cave, getting a good result back from the lab, seeing a rare bird on the property. He wrote about his memories of me, little anecdotes from my childhood that I had long forgotten. Reading it felt like having a conversation with him, like he was sitting right there with me in the dark. He wasn't a crazy old man digging holes. He was a scientist, a strategist, a protector. He had waged a silent 10-year war on my behalf. And he had won. The next morning, I walked the 5 miles back into town. I felt like a different person. The despair was gone, replaced by a quiet, fierce determination. I had a purpose. I went to the general store. Jedediah was behind the counter, and he gave me a surprised look. "Figured you'd be on the next bus out," he said. "I'm staying," I told him. "I need to buy some supplies, cleaning stuff, some basic food, work gloves." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. He helped me gather what I needed. As I was paying, using one of the crisp $50 bills from the chest, I asked him, "Do you know a good handyman? The cabin needs a lot of work. A new roof, for starters." Jedediah stared at the $50 bill, then back at my face. The pity in his eyes was gone, replaced by curiosity. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Never been more serious about anything in my life," I said. He nodded slowly. "My cousin Frank, he does good work. Not cheap, but honest. I'll give him a call for you." That afternoon, a dusty pickup truck that looked even older than Jedediah's rumbled up to the cabin. A burly man with a kind, weathered face got out. It was Frank. I showed him the cabin, the sagging roof, the rotten floorboards. He walked through it, poking at the walls, his expression grim. "This is a gut job, son," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Be cheaper to tear it down and start over." "I can't do that," I said. "It was my grandfather's. I want to fix it." He looked at me, then at the desolate property, and then back at me. He saw the determination in my eyes. He must have. "All right," he said with a sigh. "All right, kid, we'll fix it. But it's going to take time and money." "I have money," I said, and for the first time, it was true. We worked out a plan. He'd start with the roof to make the place watertight, then the floors, the windows. We'd do it in stages as I could afford it. I paid him for the first load of materials, and he promised to start the next day. As he was leaving, he paused. "You know," he said, "your granddad tried to hire me to fix this place up years ago, right before, well, you know. He ran out of money fighting the state to keep you. Said he spent every last dime on lawyers." He shook his head. "He loved you a whole lot, kid. Don't ever forget that." The work was hard, brutally hard. While Frank and his small crew worked on the cabin's structure, I took on the task of clearing out the property. I hauled away truckloads of junk. I tore down the collapsed barn piece by piece, salvaging any wood that was still good. I pulled weeds until my hands were raw and blistered, even through the thick work gloves. Every evening, exhausted and covered in dirt, I would retreat to the cave. It had become my sanctuary. I'd eat a simple meal of canned beans or soup, and I'd read more of my grandfather's journal. I learned about the local geology, about the different kinds of rock, and how the water flowed through them. I memorized his maps. The cave system was my inheritance, and I was determined to know it as well as he did. A week after my phone call with Mr. Davies, a sleek black car I never would have expected to see on this road rolled up to the property. A man in an expensive suit got out. It was Davies himself. He looked around at the flurry of activity, the new rafters going up on the cabin roof, the piles of cleared brush, and his face was a mask of controlled fury. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. "I was in the area. I thought we should talk, face to face." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, not stopping my work of loading rotten wood into a wheelbarrow. "Don't be a fool," he hissed, stepping closer. "You can't win this. We have a team of lawyers who will tie you up in court for years. We'll challenge the deed, the surveys, everything. You'll be broke before you even see a courtroom." I finally stopped and turned to face him. I was covered in sweat and grime. He was pristine in his $1,000 suit. We were from two different worlds. "And you'll be spending millions in legal fees to fight a kid for a worthless piece of land?" I asked. "Your shareholders will love that, especially when the local news gets a hold of the story. Big corporation trying to swindle an orphan out of his inheritance. It's a good story. I think it'll get a lot of attention." His face went pale. I was bluffing, but he didn't know that. I was just a kid, but I had learned from my grandfather. I had to be stubborn. I had to be smart. "This isn't over," he snarled, and got back in his car, spraying gravel as he sped away. I knew he was right. It wasn't over. But I wasn't scared anymore. I had a home to build. The next few months were a blur of work. The cabin slowly transformed. It got a new roof, new windows, a solid new floor. Frank taught me how to put up drywall, how to run basic plumbing. We installed a small solar panel system on the roof for power, and a pump to bring up the clean, cold water from the spring in the cave. It wasn't a palace, but it was becoming a home. My home. I took the envelope my grandfather had left and drove to the city to meet with the lawyers he had addressed it to. They were a small, scrappy firm that specialized in environmental law. It turned out the envelope contained a retainer, paid for years ago, and a detailed summary of his findings, along with instructions. He had been preparing for this fight all along. They were impressed by the thoroughness of his research. They agreed to represent me. With their help, I filed the official water rights claim with the state. As expected, Titan Industries immediately filed a challenge. The legal battle began, a slow, grinding process of paperwork and procedural motions. But I wasn't alone in it. I had my grandfather's meticulous research and a team of lawyers who believed in my case. Word got around Juniper Creek. People were curious about the city kid who was fixing up the old Vance place. They'd seen the developer's fancy car. They'd heard the rumors. Slowly, they started to open up. The old man from the diner would bring me a hot meal sometimes. Jedediah would drop off supplies and refuse to take full payment. Frank started calling me by my first name instead of kid. I was no longer an outsider. I was becoming part of the community, the one my grandfather had chosen to live in. One evening, I was sitting on my newly finished porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. The cabin was warm and bright behind me. The land was clean. The air was crisp. I felt a sense of peace I had never known. I thought about the word inheritance. I used to think it meant money or property, something you were given. But I was wrong. My grandfather hadn't just given me a piece of land. He had given me a purpose. He had given me a fight to win. He had given me a community to belong to. He had given me back my own history, my own name. The cave hadn't just saved me from being homeless and broke. It had saved me from being alone. It had saved me from being a number in a file. It had given me a place to stand my ground and build a life. The legal battle with Titan would drag on for another year. It would be expensive and stressful, but in the end, we would win. My grandfather's evidence was too strong, and their case was built on nothing but greed and bullying. They would eventually come to the table, and we would negotiate a leasing agreement. I wouldn't sell them the land, but I would sell them the water at a fair market price, with strict conservation limits. The deal would make me wealthy, more than I could have ever imagined. But by then, the money was secondary. What mattered was that I had honored his legacy. I had protected his home, our home. Looking back on it now, from the porch of the house I rebuilt with my own 2 hands, I realized that the most valuable thing in that chest wasn't the maps, or the evidence, or even the money. It was that first letter. It was the truth. The truth that I was not abandoned. The truth that I was loved. That's an inheritance you can't put a price on. It's the kind of wealth that can actually save a life. This whole journey, from that gray office in Portland to this porch, has taught me that home isn't just a building. It's a feeling of belonging. It's a connection to a past and a belief in a future. It's knowing that someone, somewhere, fought for you. And it's about picking up that fight yourself when the time comes. So many of us are handed stories about ourselves that aren't true. We're told we're worthless, that we're alone, that we're not good enough. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to go looking for the real story. To dig for the truth, even if it's buried deep in a dark, cold place. Because the truth can set you free, and sometimes it can lead you home. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to find your own truth or build your own home, I want to invite you to be part of this community. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below sharing a piece of your own story. I read every single one. You are not alone in your fight. Thank you for listening.
Mentally prepping for the day I must stop watching stream, apparently. Oh god. Manuel listed so hard I'd be ready for that day. Don't make purple angry. Well, I was also like, I see people on TikTok all the time too. Like you. Okay. I am here. I know. Let's see. We have a lot of sand. We have like... We have so many sand blocks, guys. Like, way too many. Beach sand, skyland sand. We have like, some might almost say 8 pounds of pocket sand in our chests right now. Guys, maybe Rich just wanted an invite to purple like Manuela and Jojo got. Okay. I guess we need to go get some concrete. I'm dying, Nelly. Not the no, I'm personally banning him. Honestly, I love all of you guys. You guys are amazing. You used to eat truffle salami with truffle honey? Oh, that sounds great. I love salami. I love all Italian cured meats. I just like cured meats in general.